Oh, okay, no problem. You're in the spotlight. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Today's panel theme is AI and automation. My name is Mohammed Jamjoom. I'm a senior correspondent with Al Jazeera English. Our esteemed guests today, Oscar Teran, who's the head of technology and solutions at Eurovision, Bogdan Frusina, the founder of Dejero, Johan Vounckx, Senior Vice President of Innovation and Technology at EVS Broadcast Equipment, and Sudrashan Shapurkar, the VP and Head of Delivery, MEA at Tech Mahindra. So today, I'm going to just try to guide this discussion. We want it very much to be a discussion, a conversation. We're going to bring the audience in about 45 minutes into this panel so you can ask questions of the guests up here. We want to talk about, essentially, are we at a time right now when we should be discussing about getting chief algorithm officers? We want to talk about the importance of AI in this industry, in the media, whether that comes to news, entertainment, sports. We want to get the thoughts of our guests about a lot of these issues. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first question, and then we'll see where the conversation proceeds. So gentlemen, I want to start with your thoughts on something we discussed a little bit earlier today. Is this now the time to think about appointing chief algorithm officers or officers with a different title but doing that same kind of capacity when it comes to AI in this industry?
To the person. I think it's really is a matter that at this point, as explained in the previous keynotes, we see that artificial intelligence, deep learning, neural networks become capable of really bringing changes in every industry, but especially also in the broadcast industry. And I think that you need a person that understands and your business and the AI algorithms, and that person should be capable of driving a team of technical specialists, of algorithm data scientists, if you want. But not only that, I think there is much more at play when you deal with artificial intelligence. There are the security, the ethical issues, there are legal issues, and so that person needs to have a leadership role to really transform his organization towards what AI can bring.
Oscar, what do you think?
I'm not very sure if we will be talking about a C-suite kind of executive. Certainly, a person driving the strategy of the business needs to be aware of all the possibilities and, first of all, the problems that we need to solve and to sort out. It should be somebody that can work transversally, especially in a media organization, because it's going to be tackling issues around audience, about operational efficiencies, about content, about creativity, and be able to deliver value at the end to the audience, at the service of the storytelling, and so on. So I'm not very sure if we are talking about kind of C-suite profile, or if it is a C-suite profile, somebody that can basically work horizontally, across the whole organization. Certainly, you need to build the talent. You need to have the right skill set and move from a very, let's say, traditional, broadcast-oriented, very rigid type of workflows to a more dynamic-based organization that is shaped around these new skill sets.
Bogdan, on to you.
Sure. If we think traditionally, let's talk about something else which we all know about, products. So traditionally, products would either report into engineering or they would report into marketing. However, in the most recent years, and actually all the big corporations, it reports directly to the CEO. In my opinion, this type of a job should report to the CEO as well. It is really big data analytics. Whether it's a C-level or not, I do agree with Oscar, but it's a department. And the reason why it has to be a department is because of all the different fields. If we think about our business itself, we've got various aspects. We've got content that we produce, generate, curate, and we ingest. All that content needs to be curate it, ensure that it's appropriate, ensure it's factual, remove fake news as much as possible, and then validate that content. So I think there's a lot of play for big data in that area. And the second side of it, understanding your viewership and the audience. So there's the business side, and I think there's the content side. And those are both very important jobs within our organizations today, and they both are related to big data. We need to understand our viewers' behavior, adjustments in behavior, real-time understanding and enjoyment of the content they're about to see or they want. And that is a very important part. So that's why I believe whoever that is should report into the CEO directly. It doesn't belong in any other department because it is a cross-functional group itself, and it is really truly understanding what is data telling you. If you can summarize that question, I think it's really what that person's job is from different aspects of the business and the organization.
Sudrashan, what would you say to that?
I'll give a different aspect to it, right? Thank you. We come from an IT services industry, right? And we are about 120,000 strong people or community of IT services. Now, traditional IT services has been our bread and butter, but about a year back, we worked with an agency to do a little bit of research on where is it that we should be heading to, right? And whether AI is the holy grail that we should actually be looking into. What came out was three most important items that the CIOs on the other side are losing sleep over. One, how do I provide better services? Second, very clearly, how do I extract more value from what I have currently in my hand? And third, how do I disrupt the industry in one form or the other? Along with that study, we also did a little bit of study on what does the AI market look like in the coming years, right? We probably found out, and the numbers can vary. It's about $30 to $35 billion worth of revenues and investments that you're looking at in the next 2 to 3 years going forward from that. Media and entertainment was probably at fourth from our study perspective, about $2.7 billion, that's what we're looking at, and the numbers can vary. So we had to change ourselves internally. We really looked at as to what is it that we need, whether we need to, and picking up a slide from the BBC gentleman, whether we need to be a generic AI or whether we need to be a narrow AI is what we really looked at. We've decided and we've looked at really saying that, again, titles change, right? But do we actually need somebody to understand digital in the organization and digital of various forms? So we believe internally that we need somebody with the technology capabilities, technology background, with probably a C-level attached to him or her as a chief digital officer to drive all these areas back into the customer. End of the day, we also have to generate value and generate money for it, right? So I think that's what we are looking at. We're probably not looking at a chief algorithm officer, because then again, it's going down very narrow base, but we're probably looking at a chief digital officer, chief strategy officer, whatever you want to call it, but again, a little more broad-based, because there are so many technologies out there, so many products, and so many different fields that we're looking at. So that's my view on that.
Okay, let me follow that up, because we're using a lot of technical jargon up here right now. And what I'm curious about is, we're talking about the broader application of artificial intelligence in the media industry. When we're saying AI, what exactly does that mean? The reason I ask that is because you could say AI in reference to certain capabilities of apps. You could say AI when you're talking about something as simple as spell checking. So what is it you're thinking of from your all's perspectives when it comes to AI and the broadening use of it in these industries? Actually, let me start with you, Sudrashan.
Okay, the backwards integration, right?
Yeah.
AI is actually the backwards integration of knowledge that you gain from doing some forward transactions. Let me put it, and let me break this up into it. Right? Initially, we started with something called as automation. Automation, everybody knows, you write a program, it does something that you want it to do. Now, you moved from automation to machine learning very, very clearly. Whereas the machine learns by itself, you give a set of instructions to it. In simple terms, in technical terms, it's called algorithms. Algorithms obviously are a set of rules. You have a rule, you get an output based on that. And from there, it's now moving into deep learning. And just to bust some of these jargons, there was a very famous example of the cat, right? Finding out the cat, Andrew Ng at Google did that very clearly. For me, automation is looking at a picture. Machine learning is looking at the picture and finding out it's actually a cat. And deep learning is predicting which way the cat will run or which way the cat will turn. Right? That is where we are really looking at. But that's the holy grail of deep learning and automation that we are really looking at. Are we anywhere closer to that? Probably in narrow parts, yes. But on a broader aspect, I don't think we're anywhere near that. You can have
Bogdan, what would you say?
I have I don't know, maybe a different view on it, not entirely, but I think artificial intelligence is overused as a term, but I believe it can also stand for something called actionable intelligence. And in my opinion is, if you can drive from a set of data, so first of all, you got to understand what are you going to collect, what data you're going to mine, how are you going to simplify it, and how are you going to present it. And if the result is intelligence that you can actually action upon, that, in my opinion, is what today AI should be. Anything further than that for computers to do everything themselves, it's always going to have glitches around it. It's just not fully baked. And it's going to take some time before we get there. But going back to the whole chief algorithm officer concept, you need somebody to understand that in your business, because it is your business, it is your data, it is what you're collecting. And whether that means it's audience data or it's content information, both are very important, I believe, in being able to actually summarize it to a C-level, especially your CEO, to be able to make the right decisions. Because CEOs make decisions based on factual information. And a lot of times, as a CEO, you never have the whole information, the whole picture. So you got to take a guess at the next step. So you effectively have to take your gut instinct and go, what's next? AI is trying to help you with that and basically provide you that information, but it's never going to give you the full picture. So I believe you still need to make the last final decision. So again, it comes down to actionable intelligence, and that's what I think AI really is.
And I think if I could just add one
Yeah,
word
go
to
ahead.
it. Sorry for
Go ahead.
very valid point that you brought out, right? For intelligence, if you add the instinct part of it,
Yeah.
that is where you are really looking at.
But computers don't have instincts.
Exactly.
Oscar, please go ahead.
I think that somehow we are living the times in which we are mystifying, thanks to the overusage of AI, artificial intelligence, the films, and everything, and all the phenomena that they're happening around the world, together with some factual elements, and we recognize ourselves that there's an AI or machine learning component into it, like self-driving cars or assisted driving cars. We are overusing, I think, that the AI word. However, the paradox, as we have seen today in the keynotes, we have that possibility. We can add value thanks to machine learning systems that they are available to everybody in the public cloud, and they can really bring value to any business. First of all, I think that is key to understand which problems you would like to sort out. The second component is being able to organize the data pipelines that they are going to feed the machine learning engine. We all understand that machine learning is let's say, an engine that it has been programmed to recognize a certain generic set of data patterns, but at the same time can deliver value and self-learn out of something that was not explicitly programmed to deliver. And basically you can apply it in every single aspect of your life and your business. In Eurovision Media Services, for example, we are using it to steer our network, take educated decisions about routing, about SLAs, about cost, how we can apply that to provide remote production services, for example. This is an area in which we apply machine learning. Yeah.
Okay. Johan, please.
Okay, maybe I will come back to the first question.
Yeah,
that you
go
asked,
ahead.
what's AI? I don't have the ready-made definition, but I would like to express my view on AI in contrast to what it's not. Let's say traditionally, when people program something, for instance for automation, these are explicit rules. If this happens, then the algorithm, the program should do something else. In artificial intelligence, actually is the opposite. There is no human or programmer that explicitly told a rule, that explicitly made a mathematical rule. Artificial intelligence learns by itself, by examples, and then become by machine learning, deep learning, where actually rather than a human explicitly programming to do something, the artificial intelligence, the deep learning, will learn from examples, just like children do, like humans do. You get a huge amount of example situations, and you get feedback. Was it wrong? Was it right? If it was wrong, you adjust your behavior. If you were right, you will reinforce that behavior. And so actually, artificial intelligence learns by example, learns by finding out itself. And in broadcast, that is very, very useful, because everything people do in broadcast, cameramen, directors, operators, the difference that humans make in broadcast is actually the human touch, the artistic things that people put in their work, in their production. And mathematical rules, so traditional programs, can't do that. Artificial intelligence, on the other hand, has the promise that it can do that it can bring that artistic touch, so just because it also learns from examples. And the way, especially neural networks work, they are somehow, to more or less extent, modeled to the human brain. And that's what brings real value for artificial intelligence, without wanting to replace humans, when we can come back to that later.
The interesting thing, I think that you have mentioned something that is very relevant, that is the component of training the system. So it's not like, I would like that the system delivers this functionality, you switch on a button, and the system gets programmed by itself. No, on the contrary, it needs to be trained, and that's normally an iterative process that is carried by humans. I give you an example. For example, Google, when we do the double authentication factor, in which it's trying to recognize the system that if you are a bot or not, normally it's asking you if, I don't know, do you recognize a car in these pictures? And I ask you to, they ask you to click, where do you see, to recognize if you have done. By doing that, we are also training an algorithm. So, and we are doing it, by the way, for free. And that's very interesting for Google. So whatever I would say is that a relevant cost, and call cost a very generic word, the training component cannot be ignored. It might take, for example, for a content-related machine learning engine to recognize content, it could take thousands and thousands of sequences that somebody needs to say, I don't know, this is tennis, or this is football, or this is fault, or this is yellow card. There are products there, but at the end, we need to understand, as I said, the problem that we need to sort out, we want to sort out, and at the same time, to understand the process to reach that goal as well, and what are the data pipelines that we need to feed the system. So it implies work transversally, indeed.
But if you think about that, it's an interesting problem. It's actually an interesting paradox, because today, let's say I'm a chief of a newsroom, and I want to make decisions. This week, I'm trying to change a little bit of programming, see how the audience will behave. I actually don't have that real-time information. I don't know how the audience behaves. I know that historically, eventually. So interestingly enough, I think that that's where part of the flaws in this is today, because we don't know what the outcome, what the behavior, and specifically for news or content that we generate, we don't know the outcome of the audience based on the content we generate on an immediate basis. Therefore, it's very difficult to train the system. So that's why I think human touch is still very important as part of that. I don't think it can be fully automated. And ultimately, I would actually disagree that instead, I would agree with the fact that a set of programmed rules are not going to be inherent, but a set of trained rules are coming out of this. So the difference is you're training the rules, you're not programming them. Because one of the biggest challenges is, just like a human, once they're trained in a certain way, it's very hard to untrain them. It's actually nearly impossible to actually change it all out and do it differently tomorrow. So the choosing of the data sets that you're putting in is just as important in the training, because that actually will drive the future rules of the system from a pure AI perspective.
So Bogdan, because you mentioned news, I just want to interject for a minute and pivot to something else, something that impacts me actually, because one of the big parts of my job is, going to places, whether they be conflict zones or whether we're reporting on humanitarian stories, and being able to come up live from those areas to report on the news as it's developing. So as a consumer of news, but also as a consumer of entertainment and sports, what I'm curious about is, first I'm going to ask Bogdan and Johan, is how would AI affect live programming in your view?
Yeah, so I think Look, at the end of the day, I think there's this concept of user-generated content that is coming up, and I think the curation of that content is going to become important to be able to identify, is it real, is it fake, is it really happening from the location? So for example, you can take Google Street View if you had the information and compare it with the background of the picture you're taking from roughly the same location. Does it look the same? Is it the same area? You can validate those kind of things. But curation of content, I was speaking with a bunch of news organizations in the US at various times, and everybody said, hey, take your mobile app and make it available to everybody so they can dump a lot of content. And I go, great. And how are you going to actually curate that content? You don't have the human power to do it. Oh, no, that's okay. We'll use AI. Great. Which AI engine are you going to use, and how are you going to train it? And the answer was, we don't know. And that's where the fallacy starts today. I'm not saying in the future this won't be solved, but that's one piece of it. The other aspect of it is providing tools for the journalists or the news operations room to be more effective. So a simple example of that is connectivity. It's the biggest problem that we have in the field for news acquisition, especially from difficult areas where you're trying to get content from and so on. So we do some connectivity stuff as Dejero and so on, but the problem is that a lot of times if I could tell the journalists before they go somewhere the difficulty they're going to run into, that would help them make a better decision of what they're going to do. Hey, I'm just going to record this. I'm not even going to bother trying to go live because it's just not going to happen. Or I should probably get a satellite truck because that's the only way I can get content out of it. So having a tool that gives you that information, it would be very handy. So those are the kind of things we're trying to implement from our perspective on a tool set to actually allow journalists to do their jobs better. But that's where I think, again, taking over the journalist job is a tough one.
Johan, let me get even a little bit more specific. I mean, let's talk about sports for a second. So if you're talking about finding the best sources of action, let's say a football match, are we talking about potentially using AI to figure out where to cut in certain sequences? I mean, how would that impact that?
Well, I will first start with giving some examples of things we developed as technology demonstrators and that are gradually being introduced in our product. A first thing that we developed is for a soccer game that by AI, the AI engine looks in real time at the video sequence and identifies where the heat of the action is. That are things that can be used for various purposes. You could use it to create a mobile first feed because a complete pitch-wide view of a soccer game on a 2-inch screen is not so pleasant to watch, so you want to zoom in. You can also use it to steer robotic cameras, so it's important to know where the heat of the action is. We can do that with artificial intelligence. We've done that. A second example, as you mentioned, is that there are 4, 5, or even 10, even 40 on a Champions League game, cameras around the pitch that using AI, we automatically select which camera to bring on air. These are things that are possible by artificial intelligence. Does that mean that all the operators suddenly are fired? No, not at all. Maybe for, let's say, lower tier games, I mean, fifth league in some small country, that otherwise would not at all be covered, there artificial intelligence brings value because you can fully automate it. For higher tier games, actually it's not replacing the operators or the journalists in case of news gathering, it's supporting them. Because in entertainment, in soccer, in sports, the main value is the entertainment, the storytelling that you do. And that's still something that humans should be in control of. But it would be great if that human can rely on artificial intelligence for, let's say, repetitive jobs, like in a soccer game. How awesome would it be for journalists just to be able to say, in natural speech, give me a shot of Messi. Give me a sequence where Kevin De Bruyne, who is a fellow countryman of mine, made a goal. Nowadays, that takes a lot of work. Artificial intelligence can automate that, and okay, we're working on pieces to prepare that, but that supports the storytelling, and that will make the storytelling even richer, allowing the people really, let's say, that have the creative mind that come up with new engagement and so on for the audience, that will help.
Oscar, I see you nodding. Did you want to add to that?
Well, I was just thinking that we have several cases in working very close with the sports federations in which we see the value of AI and machine learning. And taking an extended view of what EBS is actually developing, you realize that you can start also serving multi-stakeholder audience. At the end, around the sports, you do not only have the entertainment factor, but you have marketing agencies, the players themselves, there are sponsors around it. So thanks to the smart automation or assisted automation that you can introduce in those workflows, suddenly you can be serving, for example, brands. You can provide insightful information about how many times their logo appeared and at which time in terms of audience engagement, because you are measuring, thanks to the sound analysis in real time, what is the engagement and the focal point of attention in a football match, for example. You could be, for example, automatically provided highlight editing, specialized or somehow focus in each player. So each player can afterwards, use that pre-edited material and publish it in their social media channels. So I think that AI has a kind of magnifying effect. It opens new possibilities that before, due to the, let's say, human-related activities in workflows in broadcast, we were not able to tackle, or it was very expensive to tackle it. Suddenly we can use these tools to basically automate and reach new targets in this business.
Sudrashan, how are we converting organizations when it comes to implementing AI?
Before I answer that question, your previous question on journalism in the field, right?
Yeah.
We've had an interesting challenge that we've looked at, and that analogy I think can be fitted to your question of how do probably AI aids journalism in the field, right? We were working with one of the large aircraft manufacturers to visually inspect their planes for corrosions, for issues on hard to see areas. And planes are huge, everyone knows that, right? So where it is little more dangerous to go and inspect physically, etc., right? So what we decided was, and what we developed was a drone, which actually goes around the plane, inspects it in real time, sends the video back. That video is dissected back in the back end. Information is compared to what's written in the documents, because an AI engine is actually pulling out relevant information from the written documents, which are either handwritten or machine-written documents, comparing it what the information comes out of the video, and gives it to somebody who's actually doing the entire exercise of watching out over the plane. And that is something that is very, very similar to what you could probably do it on a field, saying that whatever video I'm taking, what happens video, right? What's the information that I can probably project? Where is it that I'm heading? Am I heading into trouble? So on and so forth. So that's something that we can draw, and which is why I said in the initial stages, right, that we're probably working more on generic AIs, which can be taken from one field to the other field and then swapped. Coming to this question of how do I educate people, or how do I retrain my teams? And probably I think, like AI is the holy grail, retraining, rethinking, and trying to program them to think differently, like you said, it's probably the holy grail of somebody learning all that. Last year, we've managed to imbibe in about 30,000 of our team members how to think differently. Are they there yet? Probably no, right? Because we're really looking at how do we train them on different ways, how do we train on technologies, how do we train them on jargon-busting words, right? What, etc. it is. But we've also realized one thing, that this training also somewhere has to start at a very grassroots level, right? Because not everybody who's currently working on one field will be able to be retrained in another field. So we started looking at educational institutes. We started looking at where we can get curriculums changed. For example, data science, right? An extremely important, big buzzword, what it is. But how do you think data? You just said that, right? How do we actually think data? How do you try and parse data, break it into simpler pieces? How do you try meaningful data out of it? Not everybody has the skill sets. Absolutely not. But I think some of it can be retrained, while everybody talks about PhD holders, data scientists, etc. But some of it can be retrained. We're working with premier institutes in India to try and see how do we pull out knowledgeable people and who want to make this as a career. Because this is not a part-time job, trust me. And it requires dedication, it requires business acumen, it requires knowledge of mathematics. I always failed in mathematics, so I don't think I can ever go towards becoming a data scientist, right? Business acumen, mathematics, financial numbers, and an ability to crunch numbers. And that's where we are really looking at. You have to attack this at multiple levels. That's where we think the training will come into.
Okay, following up on what you're saying about training being needed, I'm curious, and I want to get the thoughts of all of you on this. Ultimately, what does this do, the application of AI across various industries? Does this get rid of jobs? Is this the kind of thing where we're talking about, an example of being the auto industry, when there's more automation, more people are fired? Or are more people ultimately retrained, and then there are more jobs?
It's
You want to take a shot at it?
yeah, if you don't mind. This is it's funny because
I would like to answer that too.
I did a speech on this actually with an MBA class. The only thing that's constant about change is change itself in technology, period. So I think we live in a world of constant change. I think AI is just helping with that. It's going to drive more and more. And I think we just have to adapt to change. One of the challenges with human nature is that we're not for change. We actually don't like change, normally. We like our routines. And when those routines change, we don't adapt very quickly. However, in technology, if we think about these things, the iPhones and the Androids, how many of you have like 2-year phones like I do, right? Like I just haven't got the X because I didn't have my little speaker headset. That's the only reason why I haven't got the X yet. But I've adapted now. They've got the lightning connector that gives you the speaker, so that's okay. So anyway, the point out of that is that that's the only reason why I didn't change this. But otherwise, I would have bought one every year. Like I've done it for the last 5 or 6. So the interesting thing is that I think every day we buy a new car. The new car will have a lot of new sets. My wife just got a new car recently. She didn't want to drive it for a week. Why? Because she's got, this is all new tech stuff. I can't touch it. I need to drive my old car for a week, and then I'll practice on the new one, and then you can sell the old one. So it was really interesting that she wanted the time to adapt to the changes that are being given. And it's interesting because I think AI is just accelerating that, and it's going to drive a lot more change in a lot more areas of our life. I mean, if you look at Amazon and how the shopping happens, we had actually a conversation the other night at dinner, and if you want to really confuse the Amazon shop, take a bag and 2 people carry it out. Who are they going to charge, right? That's the interesting thing. So I think AI is becoming part of our everyday life in different forms, shapes, or facts, and we just have to embrace it. And I think embracing change is a very difficult thing for human nature. So I think we're going to have some challenges ahead. So to answer your question frankly, I think jobs will shift, not being lost. I think more jobs will be generated. Just like we said, we'd get rid of paper when we invented computers, right? So we don't use paper right now. Last time I checked.
And
more than before.
Just to add to that, right? I come from a very job-sensitive market, right? Where there are large IT service providers with large number of people, and suddenly everybody seems to be in a panic mode whether the digital age will cause people above, I'm 45, so people above 45 to be redundant or not, or people above 40 to be redundant or not, and that's important to understand, right? There will be job losses, let me be very open about it. But I think there will probably be 10 times more jobs created, easily. Because yesterday somebody was mentioning about, I think the gentleman from Microsoft saying that there are 1 million devices being added or bought alive every day. And I think you need people to understand this technology. Not everything will be programmed by robots. There will be people to write a lot of different things. Internet of Things, which is becoming a big, big thing, right? And I'm not even opening that Pandora's box over there. So I think there are a lot more jobs in the market that are going to open up. But like you said, change. And believe me, that's the toughest. When I talk to my teams, when I talk to my organization, people there who've been there for doing X number of years, the same work again and again, right? Very tough to change the thought process. And I was just, we were just talking, saying that in Hindi, and I don't know how many of you understand Hindi here, but there is a saying that "Soch badlo, desh badlega." What it actually means is you change your thinking, you can even move your nation to think differently. But that's, again, very, very difficult to do that. But yes, I think there'll be a lot more opportunities opening up. Massively, they'll be opening it up. It's only a question of, would I want to be the first one in the line to go and grab this opportunity by changing myself to think differently?
Oscar, Johan, who wants to go first on this one? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were talking that yes, it's true that the innovation cycles, they are shorter and shorter. So I think that we could send a sweet message and remain abstract, but the truth is that most probably jobs that they are very exposed to repetitive, iterative tasks that handle things that they can be dematerialized, like content, I think that they are going to be very much transformed in general by AI and automation. If you're working in the creative side of the media broadcast industry, I think that we are going to have more an assisted intelligence more than artificial intelligence. So I think that is going to be at the service at the end of humans. And related with this, well, I don't have children, but if I would have children, most probably I will teach them that that they need to learn how to transform and constant learning, and be focused in something that really brings value to the society. So besides the overpopulation of engineering, and engineers in general, perhaps it's the time to also look at the technology as an enabler for a new generation of human science, like journalists, for example. So it's very challenging times. I'm sure that in some years, the time that we are living today is going to be in the books for sure, and it's another industrial revolution, technology revolution.
Moore's law is actually out of the window for us, right? Changes does not happen in 2 years at a time, or it doesn't double. It's probably 6 months or even lesser.
Johan, can we get your thoughts?
Well, actually, I can confirm what all the other speakers told. At macro level, and even if we look at it historically, yes, automation, increase of productivity and so on. At short term and individual basis, I mean, jobs might be lost. But overall, macro level, there haven't been more jobs today than, let's say, ever before in human industry. Also because we are many more than before. But there will be a shift that requires change. But just to give some, let's say, some figures, and that's just a narrow part of creating the artificial intelligence ecosystem. The Intels, NVIDIAs, Googles of this world are hiring tens of thousands of data scientists. The place where I work, actually, since we started working on artificial intelligence, we hired people for artificial intelligence. We didn't lay off people. And also in the broadcast industry as such, we know that the audience is wanting more content, more personalized content, diversified content. On soccer again, sorry to come back to that, not only the top tier, but I mean, you don't have children, but I mean, I do. People want to watch the soccer games of their children. And to be honest, economically relevant, zero to watch that on TV. But there is a need for more content production. And then you have the option either too bad you don't have it, either you support in automation. And that's what artificial intelligence will bring. It will enable much more content production. It will not cut jobs overall. It will cause shifts in jobs. And because it assists people, it will allow people to concentrate on this storytelling, which means that the people will do what they're good at. I mean, being creative, thinking of new stuff, and relying on artificial intelligence. I can give an example that you'll probably know, I mean, Google Assistant or Amazon's Alexa. Before, you had to do a Google search and refine the search. Now in natural speech, you can just ask, hey, Google, okay, Google, where is this or that? And you get an answer. So yes, that saves me 5 to 10 minutes of my time because I don't have to type it. But it's worth. And actually, I will do more searches than before, just because the interface and the AI-powered engine underneath helps me with doing that.
One other thing that's kind of interesting. So a few weeks ago, I was in California at a summit, and there was a partner from Deloitte talking about security. Security is a big thing we have on our mind. It's something that artificial intelligence can help with. And he threw out a staggering number. There's 1 million open positions today in the United States in security. So, and all these are very high-paying jobs. They're just not able to fulfill them. The universities are not able to create enough people and scientists around that, because that is really big data. If you're talking about network security, it is big data. You got to understand an attacker, you got to understand how they got in, you got to understand how to figure that part out. So I think this also creates change and opportunity and shifts, but I just thought it was a fascinating number when I heard it. So,
absolutely, and actually you're referring to, let's say, high skill. I mean, highly educated people coming from university. I don't know whom refer to it, let's say the importance of the training and the data set. Again, when I look at my organization, yes, we hired a bunch of PhD students and so on, but we also hired people just to prepare the training sets. And that means looking at the videos, telling to the video in case it's a soccer game, here is the ball, here is this, here is that player, and so on. Just preparing that data set, which requires a huge amount of time. So that's also needed for artificial intelligence. So I just want to assure you, it's not only, let's say, some weirdo PhD students that have bright ideas. It's all across the board that new jobs will be created.
Yeah, I mean, the repetitive jobs are also created in AI, because that's how you do the training sets. I mean, no other way.
Yeah, and adding to it, right, when you say AI in the media industry, right, we're all referring to, or at least what we're looking at is for the content creation and the forward-looking areas around it. But what we also forget is that there is a backward integration that needs to be looked at. Because if you look at your infrastructure to support what is happening in the front end, there's going to be a huge shift. What do you do with your existing infrastructure? Do you just take it, junk it out? Do you bring in glitzy AI-related infrastructure? It costs you money. And that's a decision that you need to look at. So there's a lot of AI that happens in that area. The third part of it is the so-called low-lying AI, where it's not so glitzy, it's not so expensive, but probably it's the backbone of what you do. It's your support areas, right? How do you reach out to your consumers from a support perspective? Somebody calls you, would they be happy for reporting into a bot, right? Talking to that. That's also a huge line of AI that we are looking at. And I think it's important to understand that when you talk AI, it's not just one part of it. It's the end-to-end. And that's what is deep learning all about. Deep learning does not bucketize or make it into some silos, but it says end-to-end, how do you look at really an AI services. So that's important for us to understand. And that's where I think a lot of jobs will start getting created. Absolutely a lot of jobs. While there will always be large corporations like Microsoft, pushing their own infrastructure, services, etc. But a lot of backbone needs a lot of new jobs. That, I think, is definitely going to be the action item, and it's going to be an exciting time ahead. But you need to change.
You bring up an interesting point. Microsoft and Amazon and so on, or IBM, it does take that amount of type of resource to be able to create an AI engine. So an AI engine is not something you just have on site. The amount of CPU power it requires, the amount of researchers it requires, and so on, it is a tremendous amount of effort and tremendous amount of money. That is not something you just simply want to get on. So you do want to choose one of those. So one of the fundamental requirements of AI is embracing the concept of cloud. It is a very important thing to be able to understand what are your risks, how to manage that, and how to collaborate within that. So I think that's very, very important when we start thinking on our AI strategy. It's also understanding what are the blockades to be able to go to a cloud-enabled system, because without it, you simply do not have access to the computational power to be able to expand your technology or your what you currently have. You can do smaller things, like within a focus environment, within specific tasks, but if you're trying to understand a holistic approach, not possible with on-prem stuff very easily. I mean, it is, but the cost is significant.
Well, I don't fully agree, because it depends. Again, let's say in broadcast, imagine you're in the middle of nowhere with a truck and some equipment, and you can't push sufficiently in real time all your content to the cloud to do real-time processing. We are thinking, and we're working on a system that will automatically steer cameras. If it takes you 100 milliseconds, round trip to the cloud and so on, it won't work. But I agree with you that especially on the training phase, where a lot of compute resources are required, that you can deconnect, yes, and then have a highly efficient, let's say, execution of the trained model, yes, on-premise, depending on the needs and the constraints.
And this was my point. Specific tasks can be done with local compute. And they have to be to some extent, because of your cost of transmission can be significantly more on a longer term price. So you want to minimize that if possible. However, in order to actually have an efficient system that constantly updates all the time, you do need to have a really big engine that can actually do that.
1 second, Sudrashan. Oscar, it looked like you might have had a point you wanted to make. Was there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, in relation with the the cloud and the link with AI. Something is that it is very interesting is the fact that the cloud providers do not provide only the infrastructure, but they have helped in creating a framework that facilitates and democratizes the access to technology. And I think that you can see it in AI and machine learning almost everywhere. There's open software libraries, there's access to already productized tools that you can push to the public cloud and get a return in terms of image, speech to text, VIP recognition. In EBU we did an example during the World Economic Forum in recognizing VIPs automatically and so on. It simply works, you know, and they are pre-trained algorithms. What is true is that from playing with the cloud and getting some outcome to getting a product and a service that it can be linked with professional broadcast, there's still a gap. So you cannot just push hundreds of gigs into the cloud and expect a return. So there's still value and problems to sort out there. So whoever it is really afraid about their job and, you know, oh, the media industry is going to disappear. No, it's going to get transformed. Our skill sets and our way of thinking get to get adapted. But certainly there are still many challenges that they need to be sorted out in the professional broadcast domain. So,
Sudrashan, you wanted to add?
Yep, and I think this conversation that we've just had in the last minute or so, right? It actually brings back to the topic. You know, do you need a chief algorithm officer / digital officer / strategy officer? Because there's so much to bite, right? There's so less time to chew on it, and there's lesser time to get the return on time invested, right? Somebody needs to separate all this information and say, look, where is my wheat, where is my chaff? How am I going to look at it? Where is the best buck for my money that I'm going to get? Or bang for my money, I don't want to use the word bang, but where's the buck for my money that I get? How do I utilize what I have, my resources? How do I ensure that the stuff that I have doesn't get redundant instantly, and I'm not saddled with millions of dollars worth of investments instantly? Because somebody who can just navigate through all this maze, you know, will probably become the best maze runner. But that's important for us, and that's where I think, and I agree with you that somebody at that level should be reporting directly to the top bosses, because unless there is ownership from top, instead of becoming empowering, it will become overpowering. Right? And that is very, very, very important for us, both from an IT service provider, from an end consumer, from a product manufacturer, or from somebody who utilizes that services, including the end consumers like individuals, whether it is B2B, B2C, whatever it is. Right? So I fundamentally believe that that's where that role will play a very, very important aspect of it will be important for us to do that. So.
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's a new science. It's a new area of expertise in a company that we currently don't have. And the AI providers provide you the tools, but you own the data, and you got to understand how to interpret that data. When it comes to live production, something like EVS, that's in the field. They are providing you a specific function, automation through AI that provides you a product. But what do you do with that product is also important to understand and how it fits. So the strategic side of it, so this person has to be somewhat of a strategist, a scientist. It's kind of like, this is why I started with the product manager. Because if we think about products today, products have changed companies. And to be able to create successful products is very difficult. So therefore, you have to be able to report directly into a CEO, as a chief product officer at a company. Your job is the hardest job. You have to partner up with every single department, yet you control none. So you have to influence everyone, but you control nobody. I believe the AI functionality and the AI data analytics in a company is the exact same. You have to influence everyone, but you control no one. So therefore, you have to provide information and the ability to make the right decisions with the right information, again, actionable intelligence, instead of AI, because I think that's more appropriate, to the C-level execs to make those decisions. So I think that job is an absolute must, just like a chief product officer. It's almost like a product, but it's not. Like, you're not creating that for an outside, you're creating that for your own strategy. It's a product for your strategy of your company.
So let's go ahead and open up the floor for any questions from the audience. We only have about 15 minutes left. Go ahead, sir. Is there a microphone for him? Yeah, 1 second. There you go. Sorry, are you hearing? I can hear you. Can the rest of the audience hear him? Go ahead, sir.
A lot of data, but it cannot operate by itself. You should have that CAO to manipulate them, to create the algorithm, to tell them what to do. It's all about machine learning, not about AI, I think. Right?
Oh, exactly.
No, but,
You don't have AI, just machine learning and with bigger hardware and bigger data. That's all, right?
well, let's say machine learning is one specific, let's say, form of artificial intelligence. But to come to your point, yes, obviously, compute power is important. The data set is critically important. But say the humans that create, let's say, the artificial intelligence engine that make use of it, that create products, are even more important, because looking at broadcast, you need to have people that understand what does matter in broadcast. I mean, you can't, let's say, just to mention them, I mean, Google, but others as well, Microsoft and so on, they have frameworks. But I can assure you, it won't work, even if you have a zillion of images, video images, just upload it to Google, press a button and hope something meaningful will come out. It simply does not work like that. You need to have the people that understand what's the problem you want to solve, what's the best AI technology to apply to it. And yes, I agree, at this stage, most of the technologies applied are based on machine learning, because at this stage, most of the applications of the products that are being built around it are based on, let's try to copy, to mimic human behavior. And if that's your target, well then obviously machine learning is the right choice. If on the other hand, your target would be, I want to do something, let's say, completely autonomous. In that case, you might opt for a different kind of technologies. But you need to have the people that understand and the problem statement and the possible plethora of solutions that are around.
I think your question is also about how are humans not interfering with this? What is the product of AI? And I think the product of AI is better business decisions, if that makes sense, if that's what you're trying to get from data. I'll give you a simple example. So if you're a baker, you create two products. You create a French baguette and a sourdough bread. And you normally would count it in the morning and you'd make 10 loaves of each, and in the evening you count and you sold everything. So you keep on doing this the entire life, and you keep on selling 20 loaves of bread every day between the two. With AI, what you could learn is that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sourdoughs start being sold while the French baguettes get sold in the morning. So now what you could do is you could bake them in the afternoon so they are more fresh. Therefore, you could probably increase your sales in the afternoon of sourdough. So that is something that machine learning could give you back as an example to improve your business in the simplest ways of explaining it.
Yeah, so it's just a machine that executes algorithm and probability that given by a human.
Well, no, not exactly. See,
that's
that's exactly the key thing with AI. You haven't given an algorithm. What you've done, you've given it a data set of production and consumption. And then the machine came back and told you, hey, you didn't ask it, should I produce more dough in the afternoon? It comes back and it says, your utilization of sourdough bread, your sale of sourdough bread is higher in the afternoon than it is in the morning. It's a simple example of that. Humans do that naturally.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, for the bakery, he's not creating the algorithm, but the people who created that API or framework to see the data set and come with the result, they are human. So we don't have intelligent, we don't have like real intelligent hardware, right? That's my point.
if I just
Yeah,
take,
go ahead, but then we're going to need to move on to see if anybody else has a question, though. But go ahead.
yeah, because you're right, you're not there yet, okay? But the idea is to get there. For example, if I see a door which is of color blue, for me to see the door and say it's blue, there's millions of or billions of processions, calculations that happen in my brain. That's the holy grail. That's where we're trying to see how do we do that. I'm learning it. The blue turns to green. How do I say it's green? Right? That's what it is. Otherwise, what will happen? And the teaching is extremely important. What you said, right? If you remember Microsoft Tay, I don't know how many of you remember the story of Microsoft Tay, the chatbot, right? Within 16 hours, it became racist. So they had to actually bring it down. So the learning is also important. And AI is all about taking the feedback, converting it back, learning from it, and that process goes as an infinite loop. There's no ending to it.
Did you have a question, sir?
I believe, my colleague was saying that there is no artificial intelligence rather than, it's just deep learning and machine learning. Was that your question, right? So that was, his point, that there is no such thing as artificial intelligence. It's actually deep learning, machine learning, actually. Yeah.
So we can calculate very, very fast.
Yeah, but you're not telling it what to give you the answer. That's the difference, right?
But everything starts from that. You build a big machine, you provide data, the machine, this is artificial.
Sorry, can you give him the microphone so if you had a point to make as well?
I understand his question. He doesn't believe that there's real artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence doesn't start as artificial intelligence. The guys over here, for example, EVS, we're using their product. They build a big machine for a start. They provide it with data. The machine then, learns by itself, processes by itself. So you always start from zero. You always start from nothing, and then the machine builds up. And then you'll have this.
Example of it, right? Is what in media you call as a leading question. When you ask a question saying, "Is the color of the sky blue or green?" You're actually giving them two choices. Right? But artificial intelligence is asking the question, "What is the color of the sky?" And the machine then takes its own parameters, learns. It gets blue. It says wrong. Goes back into feedback. Learns it's green, and then comes back. That's what, again, that is out there. It's nobody, I don't think anybody has achieved this on such an easy scale that I'm explaining. I wish.
And you say, maybe to come back to that question, yes, let's say majority of AI-based applications today are, you start from something that has zero intelligence, a platform. You give it the first example. The platform will calculate an output. That output is compared to the ideal output. There is a difference, you adjust the model, and that you repeat over and over and over again. And at some moment in time, the model starts, let's say, to converge, meaning it learns, it becomes an expert. And that's called artificial, because it's not programmed, explicitly, and also it's because humans work like that as well. Now, we could do it differently. Rather than giving, let's say, a bunch of examples with ideal answer and then having this done automatically, we could say, okay, they are a platform, generate me a news thing. Let the audience watch it. No, it's not good. Do that over and over again. That will take tens of years. The time that it takes for a human to learn. It's more efficient if you can already upfront gather all that information and then in one big shot train the system. But that's more an optimization of the training rather than telling that it's, let's say, human programmed. And that's the difference. For me, the artificial part of it is that it's not explicitly programmed. It's artificial because it learns from examples, it learns from feedback, it learns from all kinds of external interactions and not from a programmer doing something explicitly.
The biggest challenge is not making it artificial. It is artificial. The biggest challenge is giving it intelligence.
I wanted to mention something. I like very much the comments from the three of you because, I'm a person that tries to demystify things. We can be here in this panel, put big words and everything sounds very abstract, very inaccessible, and you need to be a specialist to understand it and so on. And it's not the case for machine learning at all. You can go home and start practicing. If you know a little bit of Python and you know the problem that you would like to sort out, this afternoon you could be basically training a new system to solve a problem that you decided that it could be sorted out with machine learning. And this is one of the magics of the cloud, of what's going on in the technology industry. There's a hype around it, around AI and big words. For sure, there are applications that they are outside the domestic market, perhaps in the defense market, security market, that they are ahead of what we know, that we cannot perhaps imagine, that they have another scale. But certainly you can apply machine learning to your day-to-day and to problems that they are relevant for a specific industry as the broadcast industry. And the other point that is very relevant is that the next generation, for being a successful, let's say, professional, you cannot base the success of a company only in gaining a scale and make big investments. It's the culture of talent, understanding what's bringing new and get recycled again and again and again. So it's very good. I appreciate the comments. We need to demystify technology and make it accessible and understand where we can really bring value.
Yeah. That's a good point, and actually I would like to even reinforce that. I mean, probably people will ask the question, is artificial intelligence a hype or not? Actually, I think that's not, for me, that's not a good question, because artificial intelligence, or any other technology, that's not a purpose. I mean, there are some business constraints, some business challenges and goals that you want to resolve. And artificial intelligence seems to be a very promising answer to all these business challenges. Will it succeed? Personally, I believe it will, but if it would have been another technology solving my business problem, I would have adopted the other technology. So it's about the business, about the value that it brings, not the technology. I'm a technologist, so I hate what I tell you now, but actually it's about the value that you bring, and you choose the best solution for it.
Isn't that what we call it, AI in marketing, so we can just change whatever the technology underneath is? That's the whole trick to it. Come on,
I have
guys.
one more question about...
Yeah, we're almost out of time, so that'll be the final question.
About
Go
the
ahead.
unlearning process. So we are talking about learning and, in building the artificial intelligence. And what if, if that thing learned built on the wrong stuff, the unlearning part of that. Because right now as human, we can, it's really hard. You mentioned, it's really hard to unlearn.
Yeah.
I still drive 12 o'clock, not 4-6, because that's how I learn. So unlearning process and putting some, just to simplify the whole thing, how do we make this, intervene and stop artificial intelligence to do something which is mechanically or from machine sense right, but from the human sense it's wrong?
So the good news is on the unlearning process of any AI algorithm is really simple, delete model, done. But the bad news is you got to retrain it all and you got to remove the stuff you don't want to happen. There's a couple of things to this. So you can continuously train it with the right indication, with the right stuff you want it to do, therefore it will continue to lean towards the right direction. This is the difference between an algorithm and machine learning. Machine learning will make mistakes. An algorithm doesn't. Like a set of rules. They will always do the same thing what they've been programmed with. And that is actually the whole purpose of artificial intelligence. It's made to make mistakes. But most of the time, it won't, and the idea is to have less mistakes than what we do.
I think if I understand the question, just to add on to it, right? That's why Isaac Asimov did those 3 laws of robotics. Right? And I think somewhere we'll have to be a little more ethical. We'll have to find out that middle path. Otherwise, Skynet. I hope we don't reach there.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to our guests today, Sudrashan Shapurkar, Bogdan Frusina, Oscar Teran, and Johan Vounckx. We really appreciate having you here and being able to speak to you about these topics.
Thanks.
Thanks very much.